Ever since The Last Kingdom premiered on BBC America back in October of 2015, fans found that they couldn't get enough of the historical fiction based on the beloved books of Bernard Cornwell. And while it may be true that the story is loosely based on the invasion of England by the Danes around 866, there is no doubt that the series has kept the actual history to itself. But what are the secrets that the show has kept over the years? And can they be considered to be Easter eggs of what truly happened? Well, whether you're a fan of the show or just want to know how much of it you need to take with a pinch of salt, you've come to the right place, as we're about to explore what The Last Kingdom got right and what it decided to completely ignore. So strap yourselves in, as things are about to get historical. But before we get into it, make sure to leave a like and subscribe with notifications turned on so you don't miss out on any of the new videos we post. The general idea behind the show.
Are you wishing to die?
For those of you who haven't found the time to watch The Last Kingdom, you're definitely missing out if you're a fan of longships and Norse culture. The plot follows the story of Uhtred, as portrayed by Alexander Draymond, an English boy whose kingdom is conquered by the Danes and his family is killed in the struggle. He is then taken on as the ward of the conquering Jarl Ragnar, a respected Danish warrior and leader of the newly established Dane stronghold. Viewers watch in anticipation as the young man is introduced to the Danish lifestyle, and after becoming loyal to his new family, has his loyalty challenged when his uncle decides to attack the Danes and take back what they have stolen from England. Based on true events that led to the formation of the England we have come to know, the show treats its fans to violence, passion, and betrayal, making for historical drama that became so popular it was picked up by Netflix back in 2018. King Alfred of Wessex.
Today, we fight for Wessex!
One of the main characters introduced quietly early on in the franchise is King Alfred of Wessex, who really was the ruler of Wessex according to the history books. Having ascended to the throne in 871, the real King Alfred shares many of the characteristics mirrored by his character on the show. A great example of this was the chronic pain that Alfred suffered from, which many historians actually believe was the result of Crohn's disease. This diagnosis couldn't be made at the time since medicine was nowhere close to where it needed to be. But since King Alfred often suffered from abdominal pain, fatigue, and severe diarrhea, there's no doubt that this was the result of the inflammatory bowel disease. It also must be said that the real King Alfred, like most of the British kings, was a staunch supporter of the Church of England, and often fought for both God and country. And by fought we mean commanded troops to fight on his behalf, as he lacked any aptitude in combat. Since these characteristics are very much shared by the fictional character of The Last Kingdom who shares his name, we have to make the connection and say that Bernard Cornwell based the character on the true king of the time. This is also not the first time in the series, which is why it's been said to be loosely based on historical events. The use of the term Vikings.
First blood or to the death?
Something that the show did get wrong, though, was referring to the invading Scandinavian forces who terrorized the Anglo-Saxons throughout its runtime as both Danes and Vikings. The term Viking was, after all, only popularized after the many historical events that took place in The Last Kingdom, meaning that the world wouldn't have even known within this specific time frame. That being said, with the success of shows like Viking and the years of people referring to Danes of all sorts as Vikings regardless of their true connection to the term, the showrunner decided to take a chance and use the term so that viewers would know who the Scandinavian forces actually were. It sounds a bit odd if you actually think about it long enough, but being able to capitalize on the word Vikings probably resulted in the viewership of the series increasing tenfold, so we understand why this was done. And now we suppose it can be said that the use of the term Viking is nothing more than an Easter egg of sorts, clearly referring to what these forces were called after their invasions were publicized across the rest of the Western world. The Violent Battle of Eddington.
I will have your guts, you traitorous bastard! This is our life!
Probably one of the best episodes from the Last Kingdom franchise was the finale of Season 1, where the Danes faced off against God's army in the Battle of Eddington. We watched with clenched teeth as Uhtred led King Alfred's forces in a battle against Gunther and his hordes of Nordic barbarians. And while some aspects of the battle may have been fictionalized in order to make for an incredible viewing experience, such as the Danes being beaten outright rather than being driven into a fort and besieged, a lot of what was portrayed was actually historically accurate. The history books of importance tell us that this battle did indeed take place, as well as the far-reaching consequences of the Dane losing to the army of King Alfred in this instance. And although the arrival of Alfred's allies might have looked similar to how Gandalf saved the Fellowship with the arrival of allies of his own in the Twin Towers, it must be said that it is precisely what led to the defeat of the Danes. We thus deem this battle historically accurate and refer to the subtle inaccuracies as Easter eggs used to emphasize the success of King Alfred at this vital moment in time. The Position of Utrecht.
I'm the true Lord of Babenba,
and I'm taking it back.
Although Uhtred, being the main character of the franchise, is nothing more than a piece of fiction, it must be said that his appearance within the Last Kingdom has been considered by many fans of English history to be a reference to Uhtred the Bold, who was actually around during the Danish invasion of England. This figure that many believe Uhtred is based on actually lived after the events of the series, in the 10th and 11th centuries, which is why his appearance in the franchise is not considered to be historically accurate. That being said, the other characteristics carried by Uhtred the Bold are very similar to the Uhtred we have come to love. In fact, both were involved in a number of bloody feuds, ranging from the murder of their adoptive father to the treachery of their uncle. In other words, it's clear that Bernard Cornwell liked the stories that came with Uhtred and decided to fit him into the story regardless of when he lived, making the existence of this character one of the most obvious Easter eggs in the franchise: the formation of the Shield Wall.
Shield wall! Shield wall!
Although the armies of England fought for what they believed in, being both god and country, the Danes often found themselves having far better combat strategies at the end of the day. According to the Last Kingdom, one of these strategies was the formation of the Shield Wall, where the Danes not only lined up side by side, but overlapped shields to ensure that nobody on the front line could even be seen. We were also led to believe that the Anglo-Saxons had no idea what was going on when this tactic was used. First things first, it must be said that the Danes never used the shield tactic as it was depicted in the series. They definitely used an alternative method of a shield wall, however, which consisted of the Danish men and women standing side by side and overlapping their shields with one another. The type of formation that was used in the Last Kingdom is actually based on and reminds viewers of what the type of tactics displayed by the Spartans in the movie 300. This is not how things went down during the invasion back in those days. Secondly, the Anglo-Saxons were actually trained in shield tactics well before the Danes decided to invade, so the entire storyline of Uhtred training the Saxons to make use of shield tactics is nothing more than a plot to show where his allegiances lie. And if you squint really hard at this situation, we suppose this could once more be a reference to the movie 300, where the Spartans were infiltrated by a spy who gave valuable information to the opposing forces, being the persons at the time, leading to their eventual defeat. The weapons used throughout the show. The Last Kingdom will also have us believe that swords were the primary weapon used by both the Danish and Saxon armies during this time period, but it must be said that this was far from historically accurate. In reality, the use of swords was extremely rare and actually linked to one's financial status. Only the wealthy could afford to have swords made for themselves, and only the highest-ranking military officers were given the opportunity to carry such an incredible symbol of wealth into battle. Spears and axes, on the other hand, were far more popular, as they didn't require extensive practice to use sufficiently and were able to be bought by everyone from kings to peasants. More often than not, those weapons were actually used as common household items, only taking on the moniker of weapons once the invasion began. But since the public thinks of swords when it comes to medieval battles, the showrunner wanted to give viewers what they wanted to see, making the weapon a lot more common than it used to be, and keeping the secret status of wealth that many believed it to be back then. The lingo that was used.
Is that why you're speaking, Ashley? Sound like a Dane.
Something that fans really loved about the show was the relationship between Leofrey and Uhtred, which often consisted of quite a bit of teasing. Leofrey particularly was fond of calling Uhtred an arseling, which is an actual term used by people throughout the time period, as a means of communicating that said person has come from a donkey. Another brilliant use of historical lingo came in the form of the statement, plowing the field, which took on a bit of a sexual connotation. Another incredible historical Easter egg can be seen in the different towns introduced throughout the franchise. Look closely, and you'll see both their accurately depicted modern and Anglo-Saxon names, which is a nice little addition if we do say so ourselves. Leofrey's accent.
You could be slipping in blood and entrails before the day is out.
Lastly, when it came down to the accent of Leofrey, Adrian Bauer unfortunately ended up getting it completely wrong. As a main military commander of King Alfred, Leofrey is meant to be a native of Wessex, but he is portrayed with a heavy Yorkshire accent. And while this didn't ruin much in the broader scheme of things, we just had to bring it to your attention.
You! Stay where you are.
What do you think of The Last Kingdom? Feel free to let us know in the comment section down below.